Thanks a lot, Ken. Welcome to Joe Miller Unplugged tonight. We're going to be talking with John Marra. John, how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you, Joe?
Yeah, it's not bad, not bad. It's a little chilly out tonight.
Just a bit, yeah, just a bit. But
it's
we're used to it. Us, we're hardy Clevelanders.
Right. This is nothing. Yeah, this is nothing. 20 below with the wind chill, nothing.
Like our parents did when I was a kid, when I was your age.
No. We're the same age, by the way. You know what? You got a fascinating story here, and we've got to get right into it. This whole thing about how you defeated cancer. Most people, when they hear that they have cancer or they have an aggressive cancer, like you were diagnosed with, think that it's a death sentence, or at least it's going to be radically change their life for the worse, because the surgeries and the organs that might have to be removed in the whole ordeal. But you're a living example here of someone who conquered cancer, and you're in perfect health.
I'm in perfect
probably
health.
Better health now than ever, right?
Actually, I am in better health now than ever. When I was basically 10 years ago, I was waking up with aches and pains all over, and today I wake up like I'm 20 years old, jump out of bed, no aches, no pains. But that's just a side effect of beating cancer. Basically, my whole story started out 3 years ago, a little over 3 years, about 3.5 years ago. It was the summer of 2011. I started having these urgencies and frequencies of urination. They were coming on pretty strong. I was just basically going in, and anything I would do, I would eat. I would notice that certain foods would irritate it more. Like one night I was eating these Cocoa Puffs, and I woke up the next morning and there was some visible blood, and I got scared, and I saw, what's in it? And I saw some red dye 40 jumped out at me, and I thought, oh my gosh. So, I thought, what's that? So I started, looking at what red dye 40 was in, and pretty much a lot of the foods I was eating had contained the red dye 40. So I started then, the frequency and urgency. I stayed away from that, but I was still getting the frequency and urgencies. They're still coming. So I says, I got to go see a urologist. So I went to see my urologist, and go in there, and I says, scopes it out, and he saw a couple growths, and he says, well, there are a couple polyps, no big deal. We'll just zap them out of there. So I says, okay, no big deal. So I went in there, and they did that, and they sent me home the next day. They knocked me out for it, obviously. And then, like I said, the same day that I went home that evening, and everything was doing good. I was doing real well. Like I said, I was bleeding a lot, but then I noticed that I stopped bleeding, and then I noticed that I made a connection.
When you say you're bleeding, you mean when
there was blood in my urine.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was blood in my urine. So, excuse me. So what I would do is, I was recovering from that. They found 3 tumors then, and they biopsied them. So I still just got home from the hospital. I started eating. My mom gave me some cherries to eat, so I ate some cherries, and I started bleeding again. And I noticed the blood in the urine. So I started doing some research, and I found that the red dye was contained in also the red cherries because they weren't organic. So I started saying, I need to start going to organic foods, because these non-organic foods have not just the red dyes. And I started reading they have pesticides and herbicides, and then they're genetically modified, which we can get into all that later. But
right.
All these things.
Let me just interact here for 1 second, John, just so we paint the picture here. You're going to tell us about the symptoms and everything you had with the cancer. I think it was bladder cancer, right?
Bladder cancer, correct.
Right. But we're moving to a point here, a really spectacular point, and that is that what you're doing is you're sharing with us how you defeated, cancer, and you did it a natural way. And you'd probably say that this is how universally, the way you did it, and you're going to tell us, but universally, this is how people can conquer cancer, right?
Well, basically, yeah, because when I was doing my research, again, I'd gone there and I found out basically I had cancer. I'd gone in and the doctor says you have cancer. And at that point I started doing these BCG treatments, which were, it's a solution they put in the bladder to get rid of the cancer cells. It's supposed to help the body build antibodies against the cancer cells. So I went ahead and went through that routine and ended up, like I said, at that point I said, I need to go see an oncologist. So I went to the Cleveland Clinic to go see an oncologist. And I told him at that point I was feeling better because I was eating more organic foods. I started seeing a holistic doctor, started changing my diet, eating all natural or organic. Again, they were all fruits and vegetables and just grass-fed meat if I did eat meat, and organic breads and cereals and so forth. But I was feeling really good. And thing is, I went to see this oncologist then at the Cleveland Clinic, and he says, well, you've got a really high-grade aggressive cancer. And he says, and he goes, I've seen this before. He goes, and if it reoccurs, we're going to have to do surgery. That's what they recommend. And the surgery they wanted to do for me was basically a radical cystectomy, which consisted of taking out my bladder, prostate, lymph nodes, and 4 feet of my intestines. And then they take the intestines and reconstruct and give me a neobladder, which is in place of the bladder. So they basically give you a new bladder. But the thing is, the new bladder has to be trained and so forth, and it leaks because you don't have a prostate there to hold everything in, hold the urine in and so forth. And there's no muscle to contract and release the urine. So you have to basically push to void or catheterize the void. So,
right. Well, this doctor at the clinic, was it the Cleveland Clinic?
Yes, at the Cleveland Clinic.
They didn't give you another alternative, did they? They pretty much said that this is their way of treating the cancer, right?
Well, he said, I told him, I says, at that point, I says, well, look, I says, you're not going to find anything anyway, so we're not going to go down that road. So I go in, and he goes to do a scope, basically to look in there to see if there's any tumors. And I didn't think he'd find anything. Well, I wake up, because they put me out when I did it. And because it was a very painful procedure the first time I had it when I was awake. I says, the next one is I have to be put out because, like I said, it was just way too painful. And he says, if I do find him, he will, biopsy them while he was there. Well, I wake up, my wife's all upset. I go, what's wrong? She says, well, they found 4 new ones bigger than the first ones. And I says right away to her, I said, I'm not having the surgery, because I had done my research and I knew I just couldn't go through with what, because of the complications and what was involved. But anyway.
What stage of cancer were you in, John?
It was stage 2. Stage
2, okay. And a very aggressive cancer, too.
No, it was stage 1, but very aggressive. Very
aggressive. Okay.
It was T1, because it moved from TA grade to T1 grade, which is a stage 2. It stayed confined inside the lining of the bladder.
Okay.
Once it goes beyond into the muscle, it becomes stage 3. And then when it goes outside, it becomes stage 4 when it metastasizes through the rest of the body. But again, so I went ahead and so she went ahead and I said, well, what did he say? And she says, well, he took me in the room and says, Mrs. Marra, your husband's in a very dire situation. And basically drew a picture of the bladder and of the tumor and says, you're going to have to tell him he's a very anxious person. He has to have his bladder out. Have to have the surgery. And she basically says, doctor, you see all these buildings and pillars and fountains. Do you think they were built by anxious leaders or calm followers? Because my husband's an anxious leader. So basically he comes in and I said, so doctor, how bad is it? And he says, well, it doesn't look good. Well, he first says, well, we don't know till we get the pathology report. I said, well, in your opinion, how bad does it look? He says, well, it doesn't look good at all.
Yeah.
Okay. I said, so what are my options? That's when I said, so what are my options? And he says, well, get a second opinion. Just like that. I go, what do you mean get a second opinion? I go, you kind of are my second opinion. I go, you mean a third opinion? And he looks at me and I go, then that's when I asked him, I go, well, how's the rest of my bladder look? And he says, the rest of the bladder looks good. And that's when I told him, I says, you know what, doctor, until we've exhausted every conceivable option, it's not even on the table. He goes, it's your choice, and he walks out. He was upset. I mean,
so just to reiterate that again, the doctor wanted to take out your bladder, correct?
Correct.
Take out your intestines and make a new bladder with the intestine, which doesn't sound like it's going to be that effect, working all that properly. They take another organ and try to create a bladder for you. And so anyhow, this is major surgery. Your life would have been altered completely. I mean, like, just tell me how your physical life, let's say, would have been altered had you gone through with the surgery.
Well, basically, with the neobladder, you've got to train it at first. So you've got to void every hour, then every 2 hours. You're doing it basically every 2 hours with initially in the training. So you have to stretch it out. And in between, there's no prostate anymore to hold the urine in to contain it while it's stretching. So basically, you have to do these kegels, it's called, and do an exercise. So it takes time to build those muscles up and to retain. So therefore, you're always wearing pads because you're always leaking. And that's number one. And number two, you're still getting up every 2 hours at nighttime to void. And then you'll be able to stretch it out eventually to every 3 to 4 hours. But most people can't go beyond 4 hours without having to get up and voiding. So you're never getting a full night's sleep. I mean, right now, like now, I go to bed at midnight. I get up at 7 a.m. I can still lay in bed for another half hour before I get up and have to go to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before, I was getting up 4 or 5 times a night. And I'm like, in the beginning, you're getting up 4, 5, 6 times a night to train the neobladder initially. And then that's right after you had a major surgery. So you're never resting. The body's always under stress continually. And and then again, you'll always leak. People always leak no matter what, even if they say they're continent during the day, but at nighttime, they always have to wear a pad. And, basically it's.
And you were saying too, you might even have to have I don't know the technical term, but a bag attached to you as well. Well,
that's another option. Instead of the neobladder, which they recommended for me, I could have had a stoma and they put a bag on where you just adhere a bag to it adheres to the stoma around, and the urine flows into the bag and it catches the urine and you drain the bag.
No.
And it's on the outside of your body. And a lot of people do that. It's an easier operation, less complications with it. But like you said, you've got a bag there. People could still do what they usually do, but then again, there's still leaks that comes off and so forth, and
sure,
you get to change it. So,
and there was no guarantee that this would.
Well, here's the thing: the research I started doing, because even with if I did the surgery the way they wanted. Basically, and then they usually follow it up with chemo and radiation. There's a 50-50 chance that it may or may not come back, that I'll have a reoccurrence. And to me, that wasn't good odds. So I basically, then again, I read about all the complications. There's a lot of people have infections, a lot of urinary tract infections continually. The other thing that they're having is they have blockages because they're repairing the intestines or reconnecting them. So they always have scar tissue that develops inside and it creates blockages. So you really have to watch. You can't eat a lot of fibrous foods. If you eat meat or eat any other foods that have fiber, you have to really chew them well. And again, it's just, you have to watch. And then there's other foods that create mucus that you have to watch, because the mucus that the intestines are still creating, which is a normal process, gets into the urine, and basically it plugs up the urethra so that the urine can't come out, and then it retains it, and then you got other problems there. You can get sepsis and so forth. So
let me ask you this then: if you have, and not only you, but I'm thinking about other people too that might have cancer. Well, there's a lot of people that have cancer, by the way. It's an epidemic out there. So you have the cancer. You don't want the doctor to have to go in and operate and remove some of the, your organs and things like that. No one wants that. People are praying for an alternative. And now you found an alternative way to beat cancer. So maybe you could explain what that is.
Run it by me again. I'm sorry.
You defeated cancer without the, without the doctor having to go in and operate and take out
what I do is this. So
You know.
basically, when I got that, it's like, all right, I started praying, and basically it's like, okay, what did I miss? At that point, I'd gone back to my holistic doctor, and I would say, I'm doing everything I wanted to do. I'm praying to it. He goes, just keep doing what you're doing. He goes, stay on track. He goes, something will click. And then that's when I asked him about my pH level was always low. And it was like, okay, how do I get that up? And he told me to read a book. But it was then I started then praying, and then God pretty much guided me into, like, for example, I went to Mass one day, and in the book of Daniel, it was a reading from the book of Daniel, the beginning of Daniel, where Daniel was supposed to go into the king's service. He told the servant, he said, for the steward, he says, just give me and my companions vegetables and water for 10 days and see how we compare to the rest of the men. And after 10 days, we'll see. And then after 10 days, not only were they healthier, they were stronger and wiser than all the other men. So basically, they remained on that diet. So that was the one reading, and it kind of guided me into that. I knew eating just organic foods wasn't enough. They had to be vegetables only, not even fruit, because I found that even the sugar in fruit will feed cancer. And I found out, again, that all the carbohydrates, even if they're organic, that they turn into sugar, okay, those basically feed the cancer. But then on top of it, I found out that also, because I was dieting, I was doing the thing, I was juicing. Then juicing creates an alkaline environment. I was trying to raise my pH. But then I found out that also stress feeds the cancer, and then stress also lowers the body's pH. So that was another thing I had to do, is reduce the stress in my life. Mm-hmm. So that was another thing where, obviously I went, being.
But let me ask you a quick question here, just to clear. You were saying that there are like fruits and stuff that actually feed the cancer. And people would think that a fruit is healthy, and that would be doing just the opposite.
Well, put it this way. The best analogy I can use is like a canker sore. If you have a canker sore, you eat tomatoes. Say when I was a kid, I used to eat too many tomatoes, you used to get a canker sore. Well, once you get a canker sore, if you continue to eat tomatoes, it'll continue to feed and continue to grow, and it'll continue to spread and get worse. Well, and it won't heal. Well, it's the same basic principle. Once you get cancer, all sugar will feed cancer, even the good sugar in fruit. Just like tomatoes will irritate a canker sore, so you have to avoid tomatoes, but not the rest of your life, just until the canker sore is gone. It's the same thing with fruit. The sugar in fruit you need to avoid, because that will feed the cancer, but only till the cancer is gone. So basically, it was then just, again, because of that reading, God was guiding me into that, go on this more radical diet, because, this is what Daniel went on, and it made him healthier, stronger, and then he gained wisdom with it. It's almost like you're fasting. You're putting, instead of doing, there's many ways of fasting. A lot of people just do water only, or bread and water. Well, this is vegetables and water. Basically you're just eating.
Green vegetables that are organically grown.
Oh, no, it's not simple. Try doing it. It's the discipline is hard. It was hard. And that's where, again, I had to pray, a lot of prayer. And I asked for a lot of prayers from a lot of people to give me the strength, to do what I know I needed to do, and it was very difficult to do it. It was very difficult, but it was like going on.
Is that all you ate though?
That's all I ate. Well, I juiced in the morning. I would juice cucumbers, celery. I would put in kale, spinach, ginger, garlic, and I just basically juice that every morning and drink that down. And then I would eat for lunch. I would have salads, a lot of salads, spinach and regular romaine lettuce and leaf lettuce. I would have all kinds of, and I would give it a little olive oil and lemon I would put on it, and sea salt. I would eat.
Let's just backtrack for a second, John. And so how long did you have to just consume the green vegetables, the leafy green vegetables and all that? I mean, how many days? Did you do it for 40 days? Like, we're just saying Jesus fasted for 40 days. Did it take 40 days? Did it take 4 months, a year? I mean, how long did you have to just eat green vegetables like that?
I did it actually for about almost 4 months. What I did was, at the beginning, the first couple of weeks, I started feeling worse before I felt better because I was detoxing. And then after that, just every day, just started feeling better and better and better. And after a month, I was feeling good. And then after 2 months, then after 3 months, I was feeling so good that I called my oncologist at the clinic, and I made an appointment. I said, I need to, I want to schedule for a cystoscopy, a scope, to go in and check the bladder out. And I told him at that point I wanted to be awake this time, even though the first time I insisted on being knocked out for everyone from there on in. This time I wanted to be awake because, again, I felt really, really good at that point, because, at that point it was, let's backtrack. I mean, yeah, I did it, but that wasn't all of it. I mean, the diet was very, very important, and I stuck to it, again, for that long a time. But, it would help me get through it was a lot of prayer. But what really got me, was the stress. I mean, I had to work on my stress. Stress is the other factor that if you don't deal with the stress, because again, cancer, even though the doctors, they pretty much, you go to a doctor and when they diagnose you with cancer, it's almost like they're diagnosing you with a death sentence. And it's not a death sentence, the way the doctors portray it to be. But it is basically is a warning sign. It's just telling you two things are going on in your life. One, you're not eating the right foods, but two, you've got way too much stress. And stress is a variety of different stresses, as you know. I mean, it could be, everything from the loss of a loved one to loss of a job or finances or just anger towards someone or it could be, not enough sleep or too much exercise or too much work and so forth, and just a million different things. But again, usually it's a combination of the two. And it's when we're eating, and nowadays, the reason why cancer is so much more prevalent, and pretty much it's almost like 1 in almost every 2 people in men and 1 in every 3 in women today are going to be getting cancer in their lifetime, is because the fact that we've got half the recipe is the foods. It's the carcinogens, it's all the toxins, the GMO that's in the foods that we're eating and all these dyes and so forth. And those are half the recipe. And then you've got basically the stress on the other end. And when we go through a stressful event in our lives, or we lose our jobs, or something happens, someone, gets ill, or we lose someone in our family, all these things. I mean, we go through that, and depending on, you combine that with then the diet, that's what creates the inflammation that begins cancer. Because see, stress lowers the body's pH. It creates a breeding and living environment for the cancer. It creates acidosis, it's called. It creates an acidic environment in the body, like a dirty pond. And then cancer can breed and thrive and grow. And then, and the thing is that once we get that inflammation and it becomes irritated, then whenever we eat any other kind of food that has any kind of irritant in it, anything in it that's harmful, any carcinogen, it's going to irritate that cancer and feed it and make it grow. And then what the body does is it creates more inflammation. The body produces a tumor to protect itself from the cancer then, or from that inflammation. And that's why you form tumors. Really, the tumors are a good thing because it's protecting the body from those carcinogens that are feeding the cancer cells until the body's immune system is able to handle it. And that's why, so basically to reverse all that, I had to clean my body out. So I had to, first of all, detox it by juicing and drinking only water and basically getting all the toxins out of my body. And I lost probably about 10, 15 pounds initially, but that was all the toxins that were in my body also had to go. I had to purge them all out. Then I had to work on eating all the vegetables and then taking supplements and like some prolamine iodine and some vitamin D. I was doing vitamin D injections, vitamin C IVs. I would go to this holistic doctor and he would put an IV in me. I would get injected with vitamin C, and that would help build the immune system so the body can heal itself. And the whole idea was then also basically trying to alkalize my body. And what I did was I was doing it by juicing. I was doing it by the baking soda and water, believe it or not. You put a little baking soda and water and drink it down, it alkalizes the body. It's sodium bicarbonate. It's almost like a salt.
So when you say alkaline the body and you're talking about pH and your acids and this is a lot of talk that people have never heard of before and are probably saying like, what the heck is he talking about? How do you know if your body needs to be alkaline or if you need acid, or how do you know what your pH level is? And what is even a good pH level? I mean, how'd you even find all this stuff out?
I was doing my research, and like I said, when I was testing, when I was doing the BCG, when I go back to that, the doctor was testing my urine for microscopic blood. So I wanted to get some test strips to test my urine for microscopic blood and see how it would relate to the different foods I was eating. So I bought these strips, but they were a 10-parameter strip where not only do they test the microscopic urine or blood in the urine, it also tested the pH level, which is basically the level of, everyone's body's, the perfect level of pH is supposed to be 7.365. That's the perfect pH, the ideal. Acidic is when the body's acidic. It's when it's 5 or 6 or below. And then or 7.5 and below, but like I said, mine was 5 or 6. And then alkaline would be 7 or 8, obviously, 7.5 or 8, or 7.5 and above, which is like 8, 8.5, 9. So
okay. So if we have a scale here from 1 to 10, roughly 7.5 would be perfect, right? And if you're below that, you're acid, and if you're above that, you're alkaline. Is that right?
That's right. And the thing is that, again, cancer, and what I found out is cancer can't live in a high alkaline environment. When it's a high oxygen, high alkaline environment, it's almost I use the analogy like a swimming pool. When you have a clean swimming pool, which you have a perfect alkaline level of 7.5 or higher, and or the pH level also, bacteria and algae can't grow. But if you have a dirty pond, that has an alkaline level of 5 or 6, which is very acidic. Well, bacteria and algae grow very, rampant in it. So it's the same thing.
Okay. Now, what
kind of principle?
What causes the
body to go?
What causes you to become a swamp instead of a swimming pool? How do you get the 5 or the 6? You said it was food and stress. That's what's going to give you the 5 or 6.
Well, that's right. If you eat foods, there's all these acidic foods like meat. Any processed foods are going to give you, very acidic.
So yeah, I guess that's what I meant. There's a whole list of foods. There's a whole list of foods out there that are just going to get you into that 5 or 6 range, where you're very the pH level is on the acid side, and those are all those foods that are not organically grown, right? Like hot dogs. I love hot dogs, so those probably are not the best for you, right?
Right. I mean,
a dollar dog at the stadium. Come on.
But I do enjoy them now. Once in a while, if I go to the stadium, I'll have a hot dog now. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could.
Now, but not when you had the cancer. When you're battling the cancer, you don't take any prisoners, right?
Exactly. I mean, basically, after you beat the cancer, it's basically like I use the analogy of canker sore. Once you have a canker sore, if you get a canker sore, you have to stop eating tomatoes, citrus, but not the rest of your life until the canker sore is gone. Once it's gone, you can eat them again. I'm eating anything I want now because I don't have cancer anymore. The only difference is that I watch what I eat. I do it in moderation, number one. And number two, it depends. Again, like I said, I go back to this, what causes cancer is not just bad food, it's stress and bad food. So therefore, when I'm stressed out, I don't eat bad food. If I'm not stressed, I can eat bad food. And that's how I keep it now from coming back, which, we can get into later. But all I'm saying is that that's why stress is a big part to do with it. Because again, stress creates acidosis. It makes the body acidic. Because every negative thought we have in our mind, okay, lowers the pH. It's just, the other analogy I use for that is here's how powerful the mind is that when, for example, we get upset, we can think about something and make ourselves so upset that we begin to, our blood pressure will go up, our heart rate will go up, we'll begin to actually sweat by just thinking about something upsetting about someone. And just like a thought can create a physical reaction in our body, the same thing what stress does, it creates acidosis in the body, instantaneous. And it's again, and that basically creates a breeding and living environment for cancer. And that's why, the only way, and then people say, well, they said to me, they go, well, how did you get rid of stress? And basically, that's when, being Catholic, we have it easy. I mean, I went to confession, for starters. And then from there, I had to try to live the gospel, started forgiving people I didn't want to forgive. I had to let go of my anger, let go of a lot of the things I was doing. I had to, basically, I stopped even driving. Driving would stress me out. Someone would cut me off, or I'd get in front of someone from, whatever, I would get upset or, nervous about it. So I stopped driving, stopped watching the news. The news would upset me, watching this and that as everything, watching the daily news is very upsetting. So all those little things I just cut out of my life one by one to reduce the stress, because again, that also feeds the cancer. And it was just as equally important to do that. And, getting back to the foods, eating all alkaline foods, that's why I ate all vegetables. Vegetables, all green vegetables are alkaline. And, you basically can't go wrong. It was a guarantee. You eat just vegetables like Daniel did, it's going to basically create a hostile environment for the cancer, because cancer doesn't like alkaline environment. It doesn't like a lot of oxygen. It hates chlorophyll. Basically what bleaches to bacteria, or what, it's like a natural chemo. Chemo is to cancer, or I mean, chlorophyll is to cancer, because again, cancer can't thrive, in a high oxygen, high alkaline environment, which chlorophyll provides.
So it's like a natural chemotherapy.
Exactly, a natural chemo.
So how long?
And the thing with this is this. I mean, with chemo, there's the reverse. Chemo in the beginning, you're taking a pill. You feel great in the beginning. You take a pill. I feel good. And then as you start getting it, you get sicker and sicker and sicker, and you feel worse and worse and worse. And by the end of the chemo treatment, basically your immune system's shot, and you feel horrible, and you're bedridden. Well, with this way, this is a natural chemo. In the beginning, you go through a detoxification. So you feel horrible. You're going to feel like flu-like symptoms. You're going to feel sick. You're going to feel dizzy, headaches, achy, pains, you name it. Like I said, you feel worse. But then after those couple of weeks, every day you start feeling better and better and better and better. And then at the end of the regimen, your immune system is 100%. You feel, at the end, I felt like I was 20 years old again. Because, again, going through that, I go back to the doctor. He goes in there, he looks, no cancer, can't find anything, And what did I do? Basically, and then I'm waking up in the morning, where I used to wake up every morning. I had to roll out of bed because my back was killing me. I couldn't wash my hair because my shoulders were in such pain that I couldn't raise my arms to wash my hair. My knees were bad. I couldn't bend down with my knees. I had indigestion all the time, and constant psoriasis and dandruff, and you name it, cracked, dry skin. And all these conditions all disappeared. Every ache, pain, ailment healed in my body. And I'm jumping out of bed like I'm 20 years old again. It's just, it's great.
How long have you been without cancer now?
It's over 3 years.
Over 3 years. How long? I think I'm just trying to get an idea here. You said that you were on the diet about 4 months, and then you went back to the doctor again, right?
After 4 months, I went to the doctor, and he checked out, and he basically, what he looked at, he went in there and he saw 3 tumors. He saw 3 areas. He says they were red areas of concern. Excuse me. He wanted to biopsy these areas. And I told him, I says, no, we're going to leave him alone. I says, next time I come, my bladder will be pristine. So basically, that was the first time I went in. Then 4 more months later, I went in again. So for the next 4 months, I still stayed with the diet, but it wasn't as strict. I was then, at that point, starting to experiment because I knew that those suspicious areas that they wanted the biopsy, that they called areas of concern, were not. It's just like anything else. They had taken 4 large tumors out. It's going to leave some kind of area of new skin, to heal after 3-4 months. It's not going to heal right away because everything else looked good. And again, I'm not a doctor, but I just, like I said, I knew what I saw from the first time. And I knew when with the research I was doing on YouTube, there's a lot of videos that show the insides of bladders, that show the cancerous tumors and what it's supposed to look like and so forth. Well, anyway, to me, I was happy with it, and I just stuck with this diet. But again, I started, eating a little bit of foods here and there, some quinoa pastas maybe, and I started eating a little bit of grass-fed beef here and there. But I go back after 4 more months, so it was 8 months later, it was August of 2012, and basically you couldn't find anything. Basically, everything was 100% clear. So that's, and since then, I haven't been back because actually my bladder feels perfect. I mean, absolutely perfect. Last night I drank a huge cup of, maybe a double tea, and plus I drank a whole thing of water, and I went to bed at midnight, and I woke up at 7 a.m., and I laid in bed. I still didn't have to go to the bathroom. So where normally I would have gotten up.
You're getting good and healthy. You're healthier than all of us now. So, now the doctors, they don't have a holistic approach to healing cancer, do they? Is pretty much all drugs? Take a bunch of drugs. I think that's the way the medical field is today.
That's what they learn. I mean, They don't learn. When you learn, you go to school for medicine. You learn medicine.
Right. That's a good point. They're a medical doctor, a medicine doctor, so they're not really.
They learn how to. The first thing you walk out of a doctor's office, you're going to give you. He's going to give you a prescription for some kind of medication. And I'm not against prescriptions at all. I mean, I believe that there's a time and a place for everything. If you've got a major pain, you got to take a painkiller. What's the big deal? The thing is you don't want to take it the rest of your life, but, you want to get to the root cause. I believe all medication is just temporary. It's a temporary fix, and that's all it should be used for. But let's get to the root cause. Like, for example, you have indigestion all the time. Well, you could take, Brioche, and you could take your Tums or whatever, all you want. But, that's fine, but you can't take it the rest of your life. Eventually you got to get to the root cause. What's causing the indigestion? And basically, the same thing with this.
And one of the problems with the medicine and that too is the body becomes immune to it after a while.
Right.
You just can't keep increasing the dosage, the medical dosage, because you'll have all these other side effects. And that's the other thing too with taking drugs and all this whole pharmaceutical industry is the side effects. There's a lot of side effects. Just have to watch some of those TV commercials. Some of the side effects sound worse than the actual ailment you have. Right. But and I think we made, or I've always said, it's $100, $200 billion industry, maybe $500 billion. It could be $500 billion. I don't know. It's huge, and they're relying on us to constantly be consuming these prescription drugs of any kind to keep fueling that industry.
Well, now they're talking, I think it was about a little over a month ago, the doctors at John Hopkins, they basically came out with a study that said that now 50% of the people or 60% of the people that get cancer, it's just bad luck. That's what they're saying now. I mean, it's sad because now they turned it from a multi-trillion-dollar industry to or multi-billion-dollar industry to a multi-trillion-dollar industry because, it's not bad luck. I mean, I gave myself my cancer. Why? Because I asked my doctor what caused it. And if you ask any doctor, they'll tell you, well, we really don't know. We think being exposed to environmental toxins and smoking is the number one cause. But the thing is that I gave my cancer because why? I was too stressed out all the time and I was eating the wrong foods. It wasn't that I was eating a lot, I was eating just the wrong foods at the wrong time. Like, sweets late at night and different foods. I was eating foods that had a lot of carcinogens, they had red dyes and preservatives, and they were genetically modified foods. And, all these things were just irritating my urinary tract. And then with the stress I was undergoing, continually day in and day out, basically that's what was feeding, and it created the inflammation in my body that began the cancer. And, again, you go to the doctor right away, they want to give you, they want to tell you, oh my God, you have cancer. Well, let's cut it out. Let's burn it out. Let's chemo, radiation, that's how they want to treat it. Radically, you get out of your system. When they don't know what it is, what causes it, how are they going to treat it? We need to get to the root cause of what causes cancer.
Yeah.
Again, what causes cancer is two things. It's not just food. It's not just stress. It's both. And that's why to beat cancer, you can't just eat your way out of it, or, get rid of the stress and think you can eat what you want too. It's not going to basically work. The only thing works is it's got to be done together. You have to follow. It's God's way. Pretty much it's right out of the Bible. It's all part of, to get rid of the stress, repentance. To eat the right foods, you go in the book of Daniel and eat what Daniel and his companions ate. And pretty much those two things, you do those. And, with prayer, a lot of prayer, and a lot of people praying for you, obviously, with a lot of rosaries, a lot of novenas going on and so forth, a lot of masses being offered. I mean, that gives you the endurance. Because, again, it was very difficult to do. And that's where the prayer comes in, for God to give us the strength to be able to do it, And again, if you make the first initial effort, he gives us the strength to do it. He really does. And especially when we make that effort, I mean, our first step as Catholics, we walk in that confessional. That's the first step. And then again, and then from there, he'll help guide you through the rest, because we go there with a sincere heart, he knows, and he'll help us. All we have to do is it's like our own kids, our kids come to you. When do you ever say no? You can't say no. Our Heavenly Father will never say no to us if we ask him, and that's why I said he's there to help us. And that's what I did, is I relied and had a trust in his help, and that's the thing.
You need a support group there. It's just like, what is that? AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, where you have to have a higher power. Of course, we're relying on Jesus, of course, as our higher power for Catholic and that. But you have to bring the spiritual element. You have to bring God into this. You need his strength as well. To stay the course, not get discouraged, not get stressed out. Make sure you eat your vegetables.
By the way, I did consume a little bit of carbohydrates every day. Okay, the Eucharist. Mm-hmm. I went to Mass every day, even while I had cancer, and I did receive the body of Christ. Just even though, again, that's where you have to have faith. I'm eating, even though the accidents remain, it's still Jesus Christ, body, blood, soul, and divinity. And, and I believe, hey, I'm not going to not participate in receiving the Eucharist because I only want to eat vegetables. I'm thinking, okay, Daniel didn't need a little bit of bread, not even a morsel. But then again, I didn't eat any other bread, any other, anything else, any other carbohydrate at all. Just the Eucharist was the only carb I had.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, our food.
Okay.
That's food for the journey.
Behind you have your book, and that book, if, people want more information, they can read that book, find out what you ate and how you reduce stress, and step-by-step guide.
It's a fascinating story, if I say so myself. It goes into detail of what I did, how I did it, and again,
well, can you show us that? Can you grab that behind you, that book?
Let me grab one here.
Yeah. So he's got, he's an author. You're an author too. So there you are. There it is. Okay. Cause, Cure, Cancer Free, John Marra. And where can we get that book at? Apart from coming to your house and reading it, where
you can either, basically you just find it on Amazon, Amazon.com. It'll have it. And, you go to my website, cancerescapee.com, and then again, I have links to go to Amazon. And then I also have a blog. There's links to that also in that cancerescapee.com, a link that'll go to my blog, which is beatbladdercancer.blogspot.com. like I said, you get it through cancerescapee.com, but pretty much it just goes through and it tells, again, my story of what I did, how I did it. It lists some of the supplements I used and took and so forth. And in the book also, there's a recipes of what I eat now, how to, this way. And those are my go-to foods so I don't have to worry about, the cancer coming back. Because as long as, like I said, as long as I watch and, if I'm not stressed out, I'll eat what I want. But days that I do get stressed out and, we all go through it. And pretty much that's when I really, really am careful now what I eat. And it's been working out great for me so far. So feel great.
It's a fascinating story. Hey, just one final question. Do you think that this works on all kinds of cancer?
Absolutely. Because, not only did the protocol that I used, that, like I said, most of the people, that I found the protocol didn't have bladder cancer. They had all these other types of cancer, whether it be liver and pancreas or, whatever it was, all these other cancers, colon cancer and so forth. So pretty much it was always the same similar protocol. And the thing is that what I was running into was like, okay, why does sometimes the diet work and sometimes it didn't? And what I found was mainly that's where I found the stress was the biggest factor. That's where sometimes where it didn't work, it's the ones that didn't deal with the stress factor. Like Steve Jobs, which we can get into, in another series here, but, he had pancreatic cancer and, at first he went the holistic route. He left his work. He basically went ahead and he went on a vegan diet and he beat it. And it went into remission. Then he went back to work and he basically still stayed on the vegan diet, but the stress was there and he probably got off it once in a while, but then again, he's eating fruits and this and that, and it wasn't 100% organic. And the problem is this cancer did come back. And the second time he tried to just go on the diet, but he didn't leave his work. So he basically, the stress was still there, but he was eating the right food, but the cancer started spreading and getting worse. And that's when he had, I guess, his liver replaced and he had a liver transplant and he was taking the meds to be able to accept that so he wouldn't reject it. And basically those meds broke down his immune system where it spread then and he redeveloped it into his pancreas where then pretty much, he took him. And, it's like I said, it's unfortunate, but, cancer is a radical disease. And, conventional methods, they treat it radically. They treat it basically by surgery, chemo, radiation, which are radical methods. And, why wouldn't you treat it with a radical method of holistically, which is basically going on a radical diet and radically changing your lifestyle and get rid of your stress by basically, again, any negative thought, any kind of, those stresses are going to feed the cancer, which have to be eliminated. So, once that's done, pretty much, like I say, you allow the body to heal. If you do that radically, you'll beat the radical disease, no matter where it is on the body. Just like if you get a pimple, doesn't matter if it's on your face, if it's on your arm, it's on your leg, wherever it's on your body, if you leave it alone and don't irritate it, the body, heal itself. It's the same thing with.
So the body could heal any type of wherever the cancer is. You're saying it's pretty much the same type of problem, whether
right.
it's cancer in your bladder or pancreas.
The only thing that affects the location to me would depend on the different food or carcinogen in the food that would attack that organ or that part of that vulnerable area of the body. Like for example, why someone will get in certain areas, like someone will get it because again, that area is more vulnerable in their body and because of the food and what they do. Maybe they work that area, they increase the blood flow to that area, so you're getting more carcinogens being delivered to that area then to irritate that area. And then that's the beginning, that inflammation is then the beginning of cancer. Because as that continues to be inflamed and irritated, it just continues to then grow. And it can be anywhere in the body, just like a pimple can be anywhere on the body. Mm-hmm. And again, you heal it the same way, wherever it is. I mean, if we get a cut anywhere in our body, it's going to heal the same way. If we just put a Band-Aid on it and leave it alone, it'll heal. So it's the same thing with cancer. If we create an alkaline environment by basically eating a vegetable, vegan, vegetable-based diet, and then getting rid of stress to help alkalize the body, because that creates acidosis. Those two things in combination, will then create that hostile environment for cancer and allow the body then the immune system to just repair and heal itself.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, I want to thank you. Thank you for coming on the program. We'll definitely be doing this again, and
you're welcome.
Just a lot of encouragement for people out there who have cancer, which it's an epidemic today. So that we got to get this word out as much as possible, because there is an alternative to healing cancer, and it's the natural way, and it's God's way, and bring God into it as well with the healing. As a matter of fact, we're going to bring God into the show, and I want to ask you if you'd end with prayer. Could you lead us in a prayer there, John?
Sure. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women.
Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary,
Mother of God, pray for us sinners.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. Well, God bless you. Great luck with everything, and good health to you.
Thank you, Joe.
Good health to all of us. Thanks again. God bless.
God bless. Have a good night.
Good night.
Stay connected with Fiat Ministry Network. Like us on Facebook. Stay updated at fiatministrynetwork.tv/feed. Follow us on Twitter at Fiat Ministry Net. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Fiat Ministry Network. Fiat Ministry Network, encouraging all to say yes to Jesus Christ.